Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Breakthrough Blueprint, where we talk to entrepreneurs about how they became successful today. And I have with me my amazing friend, Zach, and I'll hand it over to him to introduce himself.
Thanks, Mel. So my name is Zach Henault. I am a serial entrepreneur in both the music industry as well as a number of other industries. But I've also spent 15 years working in the social media technology space, including 4 years at TikTok. So I think, I have an interesting combination of having worked for some of the largest tech companies in the world, as well as starting a number of successful businesses. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
It's awesome. I'm excited to dive in. So, how did you even get started? Like, what was your first entrepreneurial endeavor?
Yeah, so my first entrepreneurial endeavor was starting a event production company called Keep It Quiet with three good friends of mine. Just to take a step back and paint the picture a little bit. So this was in 2015 here in Austin, Texas. And, the city was really starting to grow and develop, but definitely had not hit the clip that it is currently on today. I think Austin right now is one of the most popular places in the United States to be, a young person. And we continue to see growth, year over year as a city. And some of that had started at the time, but there was a pretty big gap that we were seeing in terms of the experiences that we wanted to be a part of being available and what we were looking for in terms of just the kind of communities that we wanted to be a part of and the spaces that we wanted to be in. And so the four of us really decided to create really just a New Year's party. We wanted to have the New Year's party that didn't exist in Austin that we wanted to go to. And so we started with a single New Year's event and grew into basically an experiential marketing company that was having four tentpole events throughout the year. And the entire thrust behind the company was that we wanted to create an experience for people, create community for people, but also have a positive impact on the world. And so we each had a charitable cause that was important to us, and we would basically donate a portion of our profits from the events that we were having to the charitable cause of one of the partners for each event. My father unfortunately passed away from leukemia, and so mine was always the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And so it was a really great combination of being able to leverage our skills and what we were good at, um, have a good impact on the world and be able to contribute to causes that were important to us. But ultimately, we were able to create really amazing experiences for people that really at the time just, didn't exist in the city.
Wow, that is so awesome. I love that. I had no idea that your time in events and bringing people together was had gone back that far. And I know that you're from New Orleans, right? So I'm sure you've had so many great musical influences growing up. Can you talk about how that's informed everything that you're doing now creatively?
Yeah, growing up in New Orleans it was such a unique experience, and it's funny because you only have one frame of reference for what your experience when you're growing up, and so you don't think about it as being necessarily unique. You just think, oh,
Mhm.
like everybody grows up this way. But I think that there was two things that I would say about growing up in New Orleans that really influenced the way that I think about creativity. So one is obviously New Orleans is such a creative place, the birthplace of jazz, somewhere where you can literally walk down the street and hear music in so many different places. And I think music is really interwoven into the culture of the city. And, it's not only jazz music, but also as I was growing up, it was the birthplace of, Lil Wayne and Young Money. And so, you had this really interesting combination of, all of this jazz and blues and all of these really improvisational styles, but also it was one of the most impactful scenes in terms of rap and hip hop in the 90s and 2000s of really anywhere in the country. And so I really grew up in that melting pot of different kinds of music that was being expressed as well as being created. And so I think that gave me a really, really wide and diverse range of music that I was being exposed to and enjoying. And so one of the entrepreneurial projects that I have is I'm a music producer, and I produce under the name Nyoki, and I make typically melodic house music, but I've tried to incorporate a lot of different kinds of music into both the music that I'm producing as well as if I'm DJing or something like that. My DJ sets are very wide ranging in terms of the kind of music that I'll play. And I think a large part of that comes from my really diverse introduction to music across all of these different genres that I love. And then the second thing that I'll say about that is one of the most formative life experiences for me was Hurricane Katrina. And, just having everything that I knew and loved, taken away from me in an instant was, such a formative experience in so many different ways. And I could take it in so many different directions. But the thing that I'll say about that is, it ultimately ended with me finding Austin and moving here, and ultimately this becoming my second home. I'll always consider New Orleans to be my first home and where I was from, but it ultimately caused me to move to Austin and to find this place. I think that one of the things that's very similar about New Orleans and Austin is that they both have this, real love for music. One of the really interesting things that I've seen over my 26 years of living in Austin is that, this is the live music capital of the world, right? Quote unquote. And when I moved here, there was, a lot of live music, and it was very, it was an integral part of the city. And I think as the city has grown and, it's become more expensive, what we've seen is that a lot of the live musicians in Austin, quote unquote, have, moved out of the city to surrounding areas. But I don't think that the love of music here has gone away. It's just changed. And, luckily for me, it's moved a lot towards more electronic forms of music. And so we have, a top 5 club in the United States, Concourse Project. We have a ton of musicians and DJs that are, playing here and making music here and relocating here and living here and becoming part of the fabric of the community. And luckily, Austin is a place that has really chosen to invest in that kind of artistic growth. And so recently, I applied for an Austin Live Music Fund grant, which is a $20,000 grant over 2 years that I was awarded in order to continue to make music and driving tourism and activity in the city. And so I think it's really cool to live in a place that is reinvesting in its artistic community, because I think about cities in terms of this basically matrix of how much energy a place has and how much soul it has. And I think you take a place like New Orleans and it has a ton of soul, so much soul, but it doesn't have a lot of energy. There's not a lot of people that
Mm.
are really trying to do new things or start new companies or, really make a lot of moves versus a place like your home LA, tons of soul, tons of energy.
Hmm.
There's so much music. There's Hollywood's obvious there, Netflix is obviously there, but also it has a ton of energy. Like there's so many people that are trying to make moves and make music and make things happen. And so I think Austin is a place that I've traditionally considered to have a lot of energy. One of my favorite things about living here is that, anybody that you meet is always, trying to collaborate with you or trying to
Hmm.
start or trying to, do something interesting. And, I think that it is simultaneously a place that is also trying to find its soul. And so I think that it's really, again, amazing that the city understands that, isn't trying to invest in its local artist community to figure out what the next evolution of, that soul looks like.
Definitely. Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. So with that grant, like how do you intend to spend that money?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am going to do a couple of things with it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to make more music. So a portion of it will go towards supporting the actual, I guess, product of my music business, which is the music itself. And so that will look like working with all of the people that are necessary to make a song. So that
Hmm.
is, mixing engineers and mastering work and basically the things that you need to take an idea and, make it polished and nice. But another part of it will be just working with local people who also make music. So singers, session musicians, because I think it's really important to reinvest some of that money back into the community and the artists that are creating here and, help drive more of that part of the Austin economy. But the other part of it will be largely marketing. So I've spent 15 years in social media marketing, and I think one of the biggest things that I've learned and how I've always approached it is that you can have the best idea or product, but if you're not getting it out there and getting it in front of people, then it's not really going to ultimately make much of an impact. And so
Hmm.
the vast majority of it will go towards marketing the project in a way that gets it out to a national and global audience, and that is an important part of the grant because ultimately the benefit to the city of Austin is that they want to be seen as a place where there's a vibrant music community. And so it achieves my goal of having the project get more eyeballs on it. And it also achieves their goal ultimately of having the city be top of mind with potential visitors.
Got you. And can you go into a little bit more detail about your marketing plan? Just because I also work in social media and marketing, I'm just curious what your approach is going to be.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think there's a lot of different ways that I could obviously take that, but I think the top level of it is, really creating these moments of community, and then ultimately taking that community and trying to broaden it as much as possible.
Hmm.
And so, I think now what we've seen is a couple of different trends that are really affecting the way that I think about doing that. So
Hmm.
first and foremost, you have the importance of video. And
Hmm.
so when I started in social media many years ago, it was all about text. And then it was all about images. And now, video obviously is the most important thing given the, upswing of platforms like TikTok and YouTube and things like that. And so, I want to use some of the funds to be able to really invest in video content, whether that's video content tools that I use to make video myself, or ideally working with local content creators that I can use to make more video. And then the second thing that I think that we're seeing is, with the advent of AI and the popularization of all of these tools, I think that people are really striving for, more community. And I think, in Austin, we see this with, the importance of things like run clubs and all of these different third spaces, and really this desire for people to reconnect with other people. And so I want to leverage my experience with the event production that I was doing before and used it to create more community for people here. And so I think that for me specifically, that'll look like a couple things. So One, creating events that are focused, particularly, I would say, more for like sober people or sober curious people, because I don't drink. And so I really want to focus on, creating events that allow people to have more opportunities to connect in that way. But I think the second is creating, a community for people that are producing music here in Austin, because this is the first time in the very long time that I've lived here that I've been really impressed by, the music that people are creating and the musicians that I'm seeing here. I think, for a really long time we had a very strong, live music community, or people that were creating live music, but the electronic musician community, I think, has really turned a corner and people are making really amazing stuff. But I think that there's a lack of opportunities for us to, connect with each other and be able to meet each other and brainstorm and throw ideas off of each other. And so I think that that's a really underserved, segment, and a big opportunity for me to, be able to give back, but also be able to, grow this brand through, creating those connections.
Love that. That's amazing. And I know that the video that you posted when you received the grant, it was a great message that you had about just like be consistent. And that's something that I tell my audience all the time when people ask me how to get started, is like, even if it's not good at the beginning, even if people aren't watching, just start posting, get those reps in. Can you talk more about your journey doing all of that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that this is one of the most important things that I try to get across to people. I have people hit me up all the time and ask me about singing or just getting started with being creative. And I think that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And, to your point, I mean, I completely agree with, the feeling of, when you put something out at first, it's probably not going to be, that great. And I think that it's really important for more people to talk about their experience with starting something, and it not being, exactly where they want it to be. I talk about this all the time, but, when I first started making music, I'd put stuff just on SoundCloud, just as a record to myself. And I knew that it wasn't really that good, but I wanted to have it out there so that I could really put my mark and be doing it. And, it's been definitely a long journey of getting to the place where I am. And I've had a modicum of success. So over the past couple of years, I've had over 1 million streams on Spotify. I've been able to play, international shows, and so, there's definitely been some small wins, and, it's I'm a very motivated person, and I think for me, it's never enough. I don't know exactly what it is that I'm chasing, but I know I know that I'm chasing something. But, I think that the biggest thing is just, putting yourself out there. And, we live in a world in which the media environment has very rapidly shifted and continues to very rapidly shift. And, we went from a area or a environment of, social media to, whatever you want to call it. I would call it like interest media. So in the social media era, when you, put something out on, Facebook or Instagram or whatever it was, that was largely going to, your friends or people that you had connected with, or people that you had similar interests with. And now we've completely shifted to this algorithmic, interest-based media environment where when you put something out, like, you'll be lucky if the people closest to you even see it. But, your audience is really, basically everybody in the world, and anybody that could be interested in what you're creating. And so that's really shifted the way that I've thought about, my media production and what I'm doing, not in terms of the music that I'm putting out, because I always want that to be true to myself and be able to, evoke certain emotions and tell stories about the things that I'm going through in my own life. But in terms of how I market the music or how I market potential events that I'm thinking about, like those are not targeted towards people that I necessarily know. They're targeted towards interest segments that I think would align or resonate with my brand.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had a call with someone at Meta the other day. They like reached out and were like, "Hey, we see your account's growing. If you want to do like a free consulting session or whatnot, we can do that." So I had this call, and I completely believe in like making content that's authentic to yourself. Yet at the same time, they're like, "Hey, you should use the Edits app, and you could see what's trending, the trending sounds, the trending editing styles." And it's like it's almost like you were saying, to play the game of social media, to be picked up by the algorithm and like pushed out to more people, you have to do kind of what everyone else is doing. And like, yes, make it your own so it shows who you are, but use the trending sound. Do whatever is the format that's going to get more people, whether it's like a simple text overlay and a video or whatever it is. And I'm just like, well, I don't really want to do all of that. So I have this constant inner conflict where I'm like, should I try this stuff and sort of like be like everyone else and do what the popular trending things are? Or should I kind of just keep doing what I'm doing and carve out my brand and be authentic to me? And I'm always thinking about that because I do believe that I need to iterate, and I am open to trying new things. It's the only limiting factor has been free time, really. But yeah, it's something that I think about a lot, and I'll watch some of these creators that do these analyses of the state of social media, and they just show how homogenized things are, like the clean girl aesthetic or the beige and neutral color palettes or whatever it is. It's like a lot of people get popular because they know what people like, and that's going to Pilates and drinking matcha and showing that lifestyle. So that's something I think about all the time.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. It's funny that you bring that up. I actually had a conversation with my sister who is also on her own content creation journey, and she was talking about the Edits app and how you can use the templates to basically create content. And I think that the answer is somewhat both, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the way that I've always thought about it is whether I'm sitting in a boardroom with a global brand or in front of Ableton about to create a song, like my job is always the same. It's like asking the right question and getting to the essence of what I'm trying to accomplish or the brand is trying to accomplish or what we want the event to try to accomplish. And so that is what I try to highlight when I'm thinking about marketing, whether it be again across like an e-commerce brand or my own music project or a company that I've started. I think that the message and the medium I try to separate out. So, the message is what I want people to hear about. Again, like something that I'm going through or the event that I'm going to have or, whatever it is. And I want them to understand why I believe it's important. But the medium, it changes. And I think regardless of what channel it's been or what the platform is, like they have a incentive to have their content have a specific style. And so I do think it's really important to try to use things like for Instagram, for instance, to use the Edits app and try to use their templates because ultimately that's, what they're going to push out to their audience because, again, they have a certain aesthetic that they want to go for. And, my feeling about it is that if it gets my art or my events or my company in front of more eyeballs and that gives me more chances to reach people, then like that's great. And ultimately
Mm-hmm.
what makes it unique is my experience and my message and what I have to offer. But yeah, you're right, it is exhausting. And I think especially with the huge variety of channels out there and how they all have different best practices and content formats and things that work and things that don't, like it can be very difficult. And so one thing that I've always preached is trying to do a couple things really well versus trying to do everything and doing it half-ass.
Yeah.
And so one example of this is like I worked as the director of digital strategy on a special project at US Soccer. And when we were talking about the channels that we were going to leverage to reach people there, we decided to do Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and that was it. And we basically ignored all of the other channels that were out there. And that was because we had limited resources. And, we were trying to do basically communications and social media across 3 different languages because we were working on an international tournament across North and South America. And we realized that we weren't going to be able to do a great job on something like, YouTube or whatever other channels are out there. And so we just did those 3 and we tried to do them as best as we could. So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. That's kind of something I've been doing, I guess, because the podcast is something I really enjoy, but it's also fairly easy for me to do because it's just, I get to talk to my friends and record it. So it's easy for me to stay consistent with that. And definitely I'll be trying some new formats and things and trying out the Edits app because they're also like, oh, if you use the Edits app, then it's going to be favored by the algorithm. I was like, okay,
We love
great.
the algorithm.
We love it, don't we? Always play the game. But can you talk a little bit more about your other entrepreneurial things that you have going on?
Yeah, for sure. So another company that I started with some friends was a real estate investment trust. It was called 10,000 Feet. And so we basically invested in real estate in the South Texas area. So mostly in El Paso. And that was a really exciting opportunity because it got me more into something that was, less ephemeral. Throwing events is absolutely amazing, but ultimately end up with something that is very fleeting. Like you're talking about an experience that's max going to last for a couple hours. And so it was really interesting to be able to dive into real estate and be able to learn more about that process and continue to just learn about that.
That's awesome. So you developed real estate, or what kind of projects did you guys do?
Yeah, so we basically acted as the mortgage holders for real estate in the El Paso area. So we would buy the notes on houses and almost act as instead of a bank for um, you know homes in that area.
Wow, it's really interesting. So that's continuing. You're continuing with that project.
We had to wind it down.
Got you.
The team had too many babies that they were starting to take care of.
Got you. Got you. Yeah, I mean, I know the real estate market is things are changing a lot, and so that's interesting. What are you most excited about for the rest of this year?
Yeah, I think for the rest of the year, the things that I'm most excited about are, one, figuring out how to leverage this grant and what that will look like. Two, I think I don't want to give too much away, but we have been talking about the relaunch of our event production company. We had to put a pretty serious pause on everything after COVID shut everything down, and then life got in the way. And so, but I am excited about that. And then the third thing I think is just what is possible with AI. So I've been thinking a lot about leveraging especially like agentic AI to be able to create new products that I can either give away for free or possibly turn into new revenue streams. But I
Hmm.
think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens as the basically equation of human capital changes and knowledge is basically available to everybody. And I think that that's a really interesting, paradigm to be facing, both as an entrepreneur as well as, a musician. I think one of the most interesting things about the time in which we live is that, the the methods of production have basically been completely democratized. You as a normal person can go out and buy a Sony A7 camera and become a professional photographer. You can download Ableton for I think it's like $250, and you can have the exact same tools to make music that the biggest producers in the world are using. And now with AI, it's not only that the tools have been democratized, but also the knowledge around it has been democratized as well. So you can take Suno and make a brand new song that's going to sound pretty good. And so the thing that I've been thinking about a lot is when the tools and the knowledge are both democratized to that extent, what is the value that you have and what is the way that you can.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been really, really awesome. And I'd love to do this again in maybe 6 to 12 months and see how everything's going then.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to do that as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. And for everyone else, please tune into the next episode of the Breakthrough Blueprint.